This has to worry you. If BYD really believes this has to worry you because these comments from BYD about the Inflation Reduction Act in the US show that they just have no idea what's going on. They have no idea what has happened as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. In fact, as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, the US is now basically beating Europe with EVs. It's growing at a rapid pace, the fastest pace it ever has with EV adoption. But BYD believe this will actually penalize Americans, prevent them from getting electric cars, and make EVs expensive. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. My name's Sam Evans. It's great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. And I just want to say a big thank you for your support this year. I really, really do appreciate it. BYD executives say that the Inflation Reduction Act will slow down EV adoption in the US. It's doing the opposite, but anyhow, and suggested that American consumers won't be able to access the most affordable options. Basically, they're saying if you can't buy BYD cars in the US, then EVs won't be affordable in the US. Now, we should remind BYD how that's going for them in Europe. BYD, you don't have the barriers of entry to Europe, right? How's that going for you in Europe? Abysmally. You're pricing your cars way too high. They're not selling. There is no demand for your EVs in Europe, and it shouldn't be the case. You have great products. So BYD is, in my opinion, I think they're making some claims here that it makes me a little bit angry, in fact, because I think BYD are saying on the one hand, oh, if we had access to the US market, we would do this. But then what are they doing in Europe? They're doing the complete opposite to what they're saying that they would do in the US. So there's just really no evidence for this. Just because they're selling EVs affordably in Australia and in Thailand and in New Zealand doesn't mean that they're planning on doing it elsewhere. Unfortunately, at the moment, the sales reflect this internationally. BYD wants to make money out of Europe. It wants to make a lot of money, too much money. Price gouging is what I think. In fact, a lot of people in Europe have contacted me, sent me emails complaining about BYD's, they believe, price gouging in Europe because they want BYD's EVs, but they're too expensive. Anyhow, BYD company, China's homegrown company that's now become the world's biggest manufacturer of EVs, according to many analysts, including US analysts. It's not yet, not quite. It's still, still predominantly a combination company. What I mean by that is that half the cars they make are plug-in hybrids and the other half are fully electric. Really, to be fair, plug-in hybrids, most people run them, right? They run them probably a lot of the time on gasoline only. I think if you call that an EV, it's a very stretched definition. So yeah, clearly Tesla is still selling more EVs than BYD at this point. When that changes, I'll be the first to admit to it, to let you know, to show you the sales numbers, because let's be real here. I've been trumpeting BYD now ever since I started this channel just over 2 years ago, when almost no one had even heard about them outside of China. However, BYD have issued a warning for the US. They say that new climate laws could end up backfiring and leaving Americans paying more for EVs than the rest of the world. Now, I should probably remind BYD of the fact that the Tesla Model Y, all-wheel drive, 280 miles of range, costs $40,000 US. The Model 3, it costs $37,000 or $38,000 US, depending on if you buy inventory or you're not. So you're getting one for around $31,000 with the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, not everyone can get the tax credit, but most people can. So for most people, those are the prices. And that is not expensive. That's cheaper. That's cheaper than similar internal combustion engine vehicles. However, this opinion from BYD, in fact, from the person who is helping to oversee the company's global expansion as it vies with Tesla, means that I am a little bit concerned because this is the person that is actually in charge of BYD's expansion. This is the person that I believe doesn't realize what they're doing in Europe is an utter disaster. It is a disaster. And the fact they're not being called out on this by the media have reported nothing on this, nothing. I don't think the media even look at BYD sales in Europe. I haven't seen a single article from the media saying, oh, BYD sales, this is strange. They sold 20 cars. Hang on, in the UK, they've got thousands of cars sitting in showrooms, thousands of cars in the UK. None of them are selling. Well, they sold 23 in May. I looked on the websites. They've got every color you want, every option you want. They're all sitting there waiting to go, not selling. That's concerning. Now, this is probably the reason. If you ask BYD about selling EVs in Mexico, Chile, Thailand, or Australia, well, they're very positive. But if you ask them about the US, this is what they'll say. The US market isn't under our current consideration. This is a wise move, in my opinion, by the US. If it was, it would be a big problem because China makes a lot of compelling electric cars. I believe they'd want to flood the US market with EVs at below cost because that's what they're doing in China. Most companies, 95% of them are selling below cost in China to get market share. They probably do the same thing in the US. US needs some protectionism right now to protect their manufacturing. If they don't, they'll lose their automotive industry. It's their biggest manufacturing industry. So I can totally understand where the US is coming from here. I can see why BYD are frustrated, but I can also see that, well, this is certainly a problem that the US needs to solve, because if they don't, the whole world's screwed. Why are they screwed? Think about it this way, right? BYD already controls the majority of manufacturing in almost every other industry. What happens when they control the largest manufacturing industry in the world and they have a monopoly on it? What happens when China has a monopoly on the automotive industry? They already do. They already manufacture 60% of the world's electric cars. I think it's about 65%, in fact. That's a monopoly. So if BYD took the US, what's that now? 85%? 90%? That's not good. That's not good for some sort of trade balance. That's not good for sort of global stability. But anyhow, BYD, I can see why they don't agree with me here. I want you to keep in mind, though, that I do have BYD stock. I want them to succeed. I really do. But I personally am a little bit concerned right now that their strategy is too heavily focused on China. It may or may not work, but remember, there's about another 100 electric car companies in China willing to sell their cars pretty much at a loss. That's what BYD and Tesla have to compete with, and that's really challenging. Let's keep in mind that part of the legislation in the act of the IRA is aimed at boosting domestic EV manufacturing through tax incentives and funding. In boosting manufacturing, and it has worked, there has been tens of billions of dollars. In fact, I think more than $100 billion, more than $120 billion, in fact, has been invested into EV manufacturing plants and battery manufacturing plants since it was announced. It's been an unmitigated success when you look at what has happened as a result. But BYD believes that the IRA heavily favors American automakers and supply chains, that it's made it simply too expensive and unpalatable for BYD to operate in the US passenger car market. Now, before I go on and say what they said, it is worth considering that there are a lot of car brands, Polestar is one of them, selling EVs made in China in the US. So it can be done. It can be done. Now, can it be done profitably? That's a different question. BYD said this: "We need to make sure with each step we can be successful. I strongly believe that the IRA may slow down EV adoption in the US, meaning that American consumers won't be able to access the most affordable options." So I'm not really sure why she believes this. In fact, she wasn't willing to give any actual explanation on why it will slow down adoption, because we know that it's actually increasing adoption since it was instigated. Why they believe that investing money into this area and incentivizing it will slow it down, because it hasn't slowed it down anywhere else in the world. Basically, I think BYD, or at least some of the people working for BYD that are making these statements, don't understand that in China, if all EV incentives are removed, EVs will not collapse overnight, but sales would probably go down by 50%. If you removed, for example, the $10,000 average cost to get a license registration plate for a gasoline-powered car, if you remove the incentives for EVs at both state and federal level, that's a massive difference. That's why the Chinese government keeps on extending them over and over and over, keeps on extending them year after year after year. They just said they're going to extend them next year now because it works. However, Automotive News says this: "By design, the IRA was constructed to carve China out of America's EV supply chain to strengthen domestic output. But the absence of BYD and rising tensions between the US and China also are making it all but impossible for American consumers to buy some of the world's cheapest EVs." Now, Automotive News said that, but I don't think they've had a look at the price of BYD vehicles in Europe, for example, or in many markets. In many markets, they're not exactly affordable. They're no more affordable than cars that are already on sale in the US now. So these statements are not really based in fact. It's more about emotions. How do I feel about this? I'm going to say how I feel about this because emotionally, I don't like China. I don't like the US. I don't like this situation. I want to complain. That's my perspective here anyhow. For now, there's little remedy to the contradictions that I see here. Part of why BYD can sell its EVs for so much less is because of its stronghold in batteries. It's now the world's second largest battery manufacturer. Apart from being an auto supplier, the company also is the world's second largest EV manufacturer and second largest battery manufacturer. Put both of those two together, you've got a very powerful company. China completely dominates when it comes to the supply chain for the lithium that's needed for EV batteries. And while there are initial plans to boost US production, all of that is still far down the line. It will happen, but really, primarily it will happen thanks to the IRA, not in spite of it. In the end, this means US buyers will have to pay a premium to get green cars as the higher expenses for lithium batteries feed through. But keep in mind, the price of lithium has come down enormously over the past 6 months. In fact, by nearly 60%. However, BYD believe that the IRA and the US's insistence on sourcing, or at least Joe Manchin's insistence on this anyway, on sourcing the materials for batteries from places outside China will make EVs too expensive for the average consumer. Automotive News says it's a price difference that ultimately could set the country even further behind other parts of the world when it comes to EV adoption, blunting the climate change fighting goals of the IRA. You all know what I think on this. I don't agree with this. I believe that the IRA was absolutely essential. In fact, I was asking for the government to do this before we even knew anything about it. When I first started the channel, I said they had to do this. It was totally necessary. It was necessary for America to maintain its manufacturing base. And as you can see, as a result of it, the manufacturing base has actually grown. I think that's a good thing, but I could be wrong. A lot of people disagree with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.